All right, thanks, Bill, and good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. Last time I was at the Oyster South conference was in Wilmington, North Carolina, and after that, I think we all went home to lockdown. So hopefully that won't happen again, and we'll see a lot brighter future moving forward. So many of you know we've been working on this program for a long time. I'm going to move this so I can see my notes a little bit. It's a grassroots program driven by a collaboration of industry folks and scientists, regulators, extension personnel, and whatnot. Those folks have been frustrated from all perspectives on the ability to move seed, the effort that it takes to move it, what the regulations are, and those sorts of things. So this program is designed to help us move seed a little bit easier. Let's see, there we go. So as I said, it's a large project. We have a lot of collaborators. Bill is a part of it. We signed him onto it when he was working in the Gulf, thinking that he would be one of our Gulf leaders, but then he moved on to VIMS now. But we're really happy that the salvation of that is his wife, Beth, who is really running this program here and is going to help us move it there. But we do have folks at LSU, down in Corpus Christi in Texas. Leslie Sturmer is involved in this. Folks at Auburn, Scott Reichert is involved still, and Oyster South is actually participating in this and supporting it as well. You all know that shellfish aquaculture is expanding, so I'm not going to belabor this slide too much, but this is one of the products that's in our mapper here. You can see here a listing of shellfish hatchery locations. So we've put this in here just as a tool so that a couple of people have created lists. Rutgers has one that's they host through the East Coast Shellfish Growers Association. University of Auburn has one. University of Florida has one. And if you, did that come up automatically? Okay, so if you click on one of these hatchery locations, you can see what the business is, get contact information, find out what they produce, all those sorts of things. It's just one of the things that you can get access to this information a little bit easier. But I need to digress back to diseases a bit, which is a concern for this program. And I'm sure you all know that there are a number of pathogens that affect our shellfish up and down the coasts. I've added onto this slide here that I've shown a couple times some of the things that are appearing down in North Carolina. We have Bonamia parasites there. There's a scalp trematode that has been identified recently. And these things are problems. The question is, how do we stop these from spreading when we move seed? And this is a concern, for all of us. The farmers don't want to bring in things that are diseased to their farm. Regulators don't want to see anything that's going to come in and affect the shellfish stocks that they're trying to protect. So what can we do? Turns out that the most biosecure product that we can move are the young seed, the young animals. And again, I'm not going to belabor this slide as I've shown it many times before, but the gist is that aquaculture products start out essentially uninfected, and they stay that way for quite a long time before they start to pick up infections. So they're really a safe product to move. The smaller they are, the safer they are to move. So based on that, and at the risk of repeating myself, we created this regional shellfish seed biosecurity program. RSSBP for short, an acronym that rolls off everybody's tongue. But the program's intended to be national, but it really operates regionally. That's why we have the name regional in there. It's probably always going to operate regionally because the pathogen profiles differ, the species that are grown differ amongst the regions. So what's grown on the East Coast is a little bit different than what's grown in the Gulf, which is very different than what's grown on the West Coast, which is different than what's in Alaska or in Hawaii or elsewhere in the U.S. So we're not really advocating for moving across those regions, although the program is set up to potentially allow certification for such movements to happen. Our goal is really just to enhance the biosecurity in the movement of any of these products when those movements are going to happen. And with the rapid growth of aquaculture, just this Oyster South program, I don't know when it started, what did it have? Maybe 30 members? And look how many people are here today. It's really expanding quickly. So with that expansion, we're going to see a lot more movement of all this stuff happening. There are 4 core elements to the program. The first one is this Shellfish Health Advisory Council that I've shown here. And this council was created actually in 2015. It's changed a little bit. This is the current composition of it. Our intent is to have it be represent the geography of the program. We're probably going to start to increase it more in the Gulf as we expand this program into the Gulf more and more. And we may create sort of sub-panels for the different regions. But this is what's on there now. We also want to include regulators. We want to include pathologists. We want to include hatchery operators. We want to include growers and extension folks. So we're trying to represent all that. The council helps advise the project leads on here, so myself and Bill and Ryan Carnegie and others. It also seeks expert advice from this pathology working group. So the pathology working group is basically everybody we know that is working in shellfish pathology. We just tell them that they're assigned to work on this. And so far, everybody's been really cooperative and happy to help when they can. But there are not a lot of us. There's probably maybe a dozen people that are really focusing on shellfish pathology across the East and Gulf Coast. Let me speak a bit then about these other 2 things, this mapping tool and this hatchery compliance program, because those are really the meat of what we think everybody can use. Before I go on, though, I want to just say one more thing about the Advisory Council. It's a resource for all of you. So we have an email, just info@rssbp.org. And if you have an issue with shellfish seed transportation, if you're a grower and you want to get things moved in and you're having trouble doing it, you can write to us for advice and assistance. We can also contact the pathology working group to help you with that as well. If you're a regulator and you're concerned about movements that are happening and whether it's okay to approve them or not, you can write to us and we can review whatever the case is that you're concerned about. We've done both of those things and continue to do them. All right, so this map, or let's dive into it a little bit. We're constantly updating this thing. When you open it up, it appears like this. It's an interactive map. It allows you to examine pathogen distributions. You can locate the shellfish hatcheries, as I said before. But more importantly, you can compare pathogen profiles. So if you want to get something from a hatchery, what pathogens are there that you should be concerned about? And that helps guide the processes of what things you should be looking out for, okay? Previously, we had set this up differently where we had sections that were for growers, sections that were for regulators, sections that were for researchers, and that was really complex. We learned pretty quickly that it was too much information, and it really ended up requiring everybody going to some sort of expert to interpret what they were looking at. So we developed this tool called Quick View. If you click on Quick View, what happens is you get this quick setup guide, and I would recommend that if you're going to go in here, you look at this. And this provides a little bit of introductory material about how you can use this tool easily and quickly to get some information that you need. You can dive into the tool with a lot more detail, but I'll just show you what this does right now. So once you do that, it populates the coastline, and I apologize, there's a paucity of information right here because we haven't loaded all this in yet. We've been focusing on the data that Ryan Carnegie and I have up in the Mid-Atlantic, just to demonstrate the functionality of the tool, make sure it's working right for us before we send it out publicly. So that's why there's a lot of data in here. But the idea is that you can easily start to understand things. So if you were to click on one of these points, what pops up, so here I've clicked on this area down here in South Carolina. Let's say that you have an operation here in Savannah, and you look at this map, and the closest point is that one in South Carolina. You click on it, and up pops data on diseases that are there. And you can pick the disease you want to look at, whether it's dermo or MSX or whatever else, and start to understand what's there. Okay, but then we have this thing called a comparison tool, which is right here. So this is really the big advance that we made recently on here. If you click on the comparison tool, it changes the colors of all the points. All right, so the point here in South Carolina becomes yellow. That's the point of interest that you're at. And then all the other points turn either green or red. There's only one red point here on this map. and this is good. Green points mean that the disease levels at those sites are lower than the disease levels at your site. Okay, so it's relatively safe to move those things. Red ones mean they're higher. That doesn't mean you can't get things from those sites, but you're going to have to do a little bit more further inspection on it to identify, okay, how much higher are they? If I buy the seed, are the seed clean? Those sorts of things. So it allows you to look at that pretty quickly. You can then go in and explore all those other details. You could open up the map layers and add different layers in there, do as much comparison as you want to. You can download the data. Your regulator can download the data and analyze it further. Lastly, I want to mention the hatchery compliance program. So this is a program that is piloted and is now operational. This program is designed to incentivize the transfer of biosecure products. So, I mean, nobody wants to buy infected seed. You want to buy clean stuff that's going to grow and tolerate the conditions where you are and make it to market. So hatcheries are required to, if they participate, to implement best management practices for biosecurity. It creates a health history for that hatchery, so there's something that a regulator can evaluate whether or not they've been operating cleanly for a long period of time. And this ultimately enhances biosecurity of the facility, should facilitate decision-making, making it much more easily, save time, and reduce costs. The program's completely voluntary. Hatcheries do not need to participate. There are many hatcheries and nurseries that may not have interest in participating in this because they only sell locally and don't need to be concerned about interstate or out of their water body transfers. Same thing, states do not need to participate in this, but we have only found one state so far that has said they weren't really interested in the program, but I think that's changing because they recently had a retirement, and the new person that's coming on is much more open to considerations. But so far, every other state from Maine to Texas has indicated they're interested in this programming and using it to help facilitate their decision-making and support hatcheries and nurseries in moving products. I'll stop here and thank you all for your attention. See if there are any questions I can answer.
Great. Thanks. Any questions for Dave? Yeah.
You mentioned that states are interested in participating. Can you give me a feeling whether Florida is interested enough to eliminate the vet cert requirement?
Yeah, so actually Leslie might be able to address that a little bit better, but I think they are. We've been working with Portia over there to help. I think she's an FDAC, so.
Yeah, Portia's the division director, and all our aquaculture regulations and leasing program are housed in our state agriculture agency, which is a good thing. But because it is an agriculture agency, there is a state vet, and that is where the vet requirement came in. We did have a good Zoom call with Portia and Charlie Culpepper at the time with your group, I think a year ago now.
Yep.
Quite frankly, I did not see a relinquish of that particular criteria unless there's something new. And it's because, again, being an agency with an agricultural state veterinarian.
Yeah, so let me add to that. We are working on that from a different direction. That is, the USDA is a partner with us, and the USDA APHIS Veterinary Services is working with us closely. They are developing something called CAPS, Comprehensive, I'm going to forget the name of it, Comprehensive Aquaculture Program, something. In any case, it's a biosecurity program that they're developed for all of aquatic animal production in there, and so we're looking to them to help resolve those sorts of issues in some of the states. Florida's not the only state that has an ag requirement on it, but in terms of participation of other states, I can tell you that Massachusetts, which used to be a very strict zero tolerance policy state, is now accepting the hatchery certification program to bypass those sorts of requirements.
Okay. A couple more. One more question, then we'll move on.
Is your program pull together research and information on different...
Kurt, could you take the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry. Has your program pulled together the research data to date on the different diseases and locations? Meaning, from a relevant standpoint, obviously there have been some stories where, disease-resistant stocks were used, let's say, from Rutgers up in Maine. They believe the disease got out there and it was a different strain and it caused a problem, right? But in Florida, certainly one of our difficulties in our state specifically is moving seed around, and the thing that we seem to get caught with each time is just dermo popping up at some super low level, even in seed or the animals, or even trying to move, just to try to get sperm around to produce triploids. And that's a real issue for us. So do you have any data, let's say, on dermo throughout the Gulf that our state can look at or understand better to say that, look, the strains here should not be causing a problem, or there are not different strains, or what's our present state of knowledge, and do you hold that information?
Yeah, so the data we have on dermo, there's a couple of things about that. One is we do have the dermo watch data, although it's not being actively collected everywhere now. We're trying to increase that program. Also, you mentioned resistant stocks being used here and there. We're having to treat farm data differently than we treat surveillance data from wild populations. So the data we're presenting publicly right now is all surveillance data because of confidentiality issues for farmers and things until we resolve those. So we're working on that. But dermo is a funny one that people are all concerned about strains and levels of virulence and all that, and that was my dissertation work, and identified that there was differences between the Gulf and Atlantic strains and things like that. The differences, although statistically significant, are not usually biologically meaningful in that they don't cause huge differences amongst the populations. We can see them, but they're not. You're not going to create a huge epizootic by changing strains. It's really more the infective doses that are moving around that's a problem. Infective doses need to be really high. So those cases where somebody's got a sperm sample and they find a dermo cells in it, I'm not concerned about that in the least bit. I know there's a lot of people who will stop things for that, or they'll find a couple cells in a larval batch that they're going to set out for a remote setting, and that will cancel an entire remote setting operation because they found a dermo cell. Personally, I think that's ridiculous, and I would not recommend that be a problem. On the other hand, if there are repeated levels, and the reason we want to look at the hatcheries repeatedly is that should not occur continuously. If it's occurring continuously, their biosecurity plans are not effective. They shouldn't. If it happens now and then, that's one thing. This is why we want to see a history of what's happening in the hatcheries, rather than just a single one-off. This is what happened in this one sample.
I think John wanted to ask a question too, and we'll wrap on that.
Thanks, Dave. You just answered my question regarding transfer of larvae.
All right. Thank you, Dave.